Chris Heasley Show, coming to you from Radio Debang, the North America's premier broadcasting network.
Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. And January 6th, 2021 was a day that Americans used to embrace their political freedom, to exercise their First Amendment, to address their governance, as is their constitutional right. It was a day to celebrate freedom in this country. And what the deep state, the American deep state operatives did, the bureaucrats, the unelected bureaucrats that run our government in a tyrannical way, what they did is they chose to take that event and weaponize it against the American people. They misconstrued and maligned the people in that event in the most malicious way for the political ends that they intended to achieve. When a party constructs an event for a political outcome, that is a crime. And the crime happened not from the Americans that attended that political rally, but from the deep state operatives that construed it in a malicious, fraudulent way to malign those innocent Americans. And the corporate media that went along with that message, the corporate media that today we know has no credibility. It is a political instrument used for those that are attached to the highest level of government, nothing more. It's not about truth. And they used all of those apparatuses against our freedoms. And it didn't stop there. It went down to the local level. We'd all like to think that the crime happened way off on the other side of this continent, 13 hours by drive away from here in D.C. We'd like to say it happened that far. It didn't happen It didn't happen just that far away. It happened local too. Because when the memorandums came in to the local faxes, all the local stooges got in line, your local bureaucrats, with the same message that they knew was a lie. And they attempted to use it locally at the local level in Fort Bend County, Texas, and Houston, Texas, against the citizens that live and reside here. The people that we elect locally are our last line of defense. And they used that last line to go against us. And it's at the local level where the greatest crime happens, because at the local level, we see these people. We see them at the grocery store. We see them at the gas station. We see them in the local parks when we're walking our kids. And they chose to use that message against us. And so what happened on January 6th, it can never happen again. And we have to get to the bottom of it. We have to root it out so that it never happens again. And the only way that happens is if we totally understand that story, and then we call for justice to happen against those actors that initiated that event and all those actors along the way that participated in it against the American people. And we need to ask the question, who were they reporting to? Because by law, your governance at all levels has only one duty, and it is to report to the citizens of this country. And if they were reporting to a foreign entity, to a Soros entity, to a Hungarian financier and his crew of bankers, that is a treasonous event. And we need to find out if that's the case. And we have someone here that is totally qualified to tell this story, a man who had the courage to go to the January 6th Trump rally, a man who has stood in the face of political correctness and swam upstream, right? When political correctness came, everyone swims with it because they're afraid. Stewart Rhodes swam upstream. He went into the fire. He stood up to political correctness, and he broke speech laws. He violated the speech code of the left. And when you do that, you make some enemies on the left. But when you do that at the same time, you're exercising your First Amendment. And if you don't exercise your First Amendment, you lose it. So I'm very happy, very proud to have in the studio today Stewart Rhodes. Stewart, how are you doing today?
Good, brother. How you doing?
Good.
I had a million co-conspirators in that violation of the left woke code. So a million Trump supporters were there to stand up against their coup.
Yeah. Well, man, like I said, we appreciate it. It's very rare to meet someone who has the courage to go against the odds. When they dropped the Wuhan on us, when they stole the 2020 election, so many people that we look to for leadership and guidance and, heroics, they cowered down and told us to obey the left.
Yeah.
We found out then and there who the true men were. And certainly you have courage that has no bounds. So I want to hear all about it.
You bet. I mean, I think the best way to look at January the 6th is a continuation of the COVID coup. They pulled a coup in 2020. Not only was it obviously fraudulent with all the mail-in ballots and all the other fraud they did in the machines, but it was on its face illegal. They violated state election law in multiple swing states, and that triggered a violation of Article 2, which is what Ken Paxton said when he sued on behalf of Texas, sued Pennsylvania, and said, you violated Article 2 of the Constitution. The judges in Pennsylvania can't just do what they want. They have to follow the law passed by the state legislature. Article 2 says state legislatures alone have the authority to determine the manner for selecting electors. That means you must follow state election law. What should have happened in that case, it went straight to the Supreme Court, because when one state sues another, it's under the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. And 20 other states joined the lawsuit. That should have been settled right there.
If I may.
Sure.
The entire premise that Ken Paxton had is he was essentially saying that elections in the state of Pennsylvania were done fraudulently and not in accordance with the law, and thereby it was so egregious that it essentially spoils the U.S. electoral system. Is that what happened?
Well, it's the same exact argument that was made in 2000 in Bush v. Gore, when they're counting the hanging chads, and the Florida Supreme Court decided to make up new rules. They call them new rules. They were violating Florida election law. Supreme Court stepped in through Article 2 and said, you have to use the law passed by the state legislature of Florida. And that's why it went to Bush instead of Gore. That's what should have happened in 2020. But in 2020, the Supreme Court sat on their hands. Only Alito and Thomas were ready to do their duty. The rest of them, including Kavanaugh, Barrett, and Roberts, joined with the leftists and did nothing, and sat on their hands and abdicated their responsibility.
Yeah, because they knew that President Trump was going to come in unhinged. He would not be beholden to any deep state agenda, and he could literally initiate a constitutional reformation in our country. So for these elected officials, these judges, even if they have a lot of the good leanings, so many of them are so caught up in their own degrees and their resumes and things of that sort, and they are bothered and annoyed by us peasants who are demanding our freedoms.
Right.
And really, I think that they saw Trump as a cancer that had to be stopped. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a uniparty, and that's why I bring up Roberts and Kavanaugh and Barrett. Two judges that he actually put on the court. They were part of the establishment GOP that hates Trump, still does to this day. And their entire strategy the first term was to distract him and run the clock out. And now they're doing that again. But that's why they had to stop him from coming back into office if they could. So I consider it a uniparty coup, not just a Democrat coup. It's the uniparty. Look at Tillis in North Carolina. He was all about that, all about persecuting all the J6ers. He's the same one that didn't want Ed Martin to be the U.S. attorney for D.C. So this is
what was that man's name? Tullis. What's his name?
Tullis. He's the senator from North Carolina.
Democrat?
No, Republican. That's my point. Just as one example of the never Trumper uniparty on both the left and the right.
Yeah, right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I call them the uniparty because they are the establishment, and they don't care about Make America Great Again. In fact, they hate it. That's why I think in the midterms coming up, they wouldn't mind losing. They don't care about that. They would rather lose the elections and lose, nominal control than to have the grift end. That's why they hated Doge, have put an end to that. That's why they hate President Trump's agenda for Make America Great Again. They just want the establishment grift to continue on.
All right, man. So let's talk about that day.
Sure.
Tell me let's step back for 1 second. Tell me about Oath Keepers. How did this organization come to be? Tell me, did you start it? Tell me how that happened.
Yeah, I'm the founder of Oath Keepers. I started it right after the Ron Paul campaign in 2008. I had worked for Congressman Paul in Congress. When I got after I graduated from Yale Law School, I clerked for the Arizona Supreme Court, and then I ran, in Montana. I was a small town criminal defense attorney, but then I wound up working for the Ron Paul campaign in Nevada, and I watched them steal the nomination from Ron Paul. And I watched the corrupt GOP once again, same thing. You had Ron Paul, who was a sincere anti-war, anti-establishment, pro-constitution libertarian, ran as a Republican. You had Democrats crossing over and voting for him by the millions, and you had a lot of independents also voting for him. The same exact thing that Trump did. He tapped into walkaway Democrats and independents. Same thing. But they stopped Ron Paul's nomination with corruption. They just didn't follow their own rules at our state convention.
Well, the other thing that they do is they sort of lampoon Ron Paul, right? I mean, all of his ideas are the foundations of his ideas. The ideology is built in stone. We now know when. So, for example, one thing is, his whole campaign to end the Fed. It was one man going up against the Fed, which is, he's not enough. And what they were able to do is sort of lampoon that whole thing. At that time, I was in an East Coast grad school, and you were not allowed to talk about the Fed in anything but, an enamored way, right? The Fed was the gold standard. And here comes Ron Paul with this new idea that the Fed is a set of corrupt banksters,
right.
Gangsters. There's nothing but a Tony Soprano's in a nicer suit. And what the media did is they sort of lampooned him to discredit him.
And so did the GOP. Mm-hmm. That's my point, is that the nomination was stolen from him by the GOP, not by the Democrats. The Republican Party did that to him. So at the state convention in Nevada, I was on the platform committee. We were so much better organized as Ron Paulers. We were going to take all the delegates. And so what they do, the chairman got up and smacked the gavel and said, we're out of time. We can't use this room any longer. We got to adjourn and reconvene at a later date. And we're like, what are you talking about? It's a 24-hour casino. And all the McCain people fled the building to deny us a quorum, and they never did reconvene. They just picked their own delegates. They just stole the nomination from him. And that happened in multiple states. So that's when I became black-pilled about the corruption inside the GOP. And that's when I said, okay, we're FUBAR in this country, whether it's Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, or McCain, who's another oath breaker. I wanted to focus on the men that I believe still have honor and courage. That's the men in the military, police, firefighters.
And you are ex-military.
Yes, I served as a paratrooper in the 80s, and I'm a disabled veteran. I also served as a volunteer firefighter in Montana. So I know these men have courage and honor. So that's what I focused on. But I wanted to cause what I call strategic doubt in the minds of the establishment about whether their orders would be followed if they try to violate our rights. And the flagship example we used back then was Hurricane Katrina, where you had police officers brought from all over the country to help, who ended up obeying unconstitutional orders to confiscate guns from the citizens of New Orleans, went house to house, disarming people. Because they had an anti-gun police chief, an anti-gun Democrat mayor who wanted to take all the guns. And so that was a big wake-up call. These police officers need better education on the Constitution and the responsibility to say no.
Yeah, I mean, that was a trial balloon. They were going to kick the tires and see what they could get away with. And that was the Republicans. That was the George Bush administration that went tyrannical, although it
was the police chief and mayor in particular. But yes, it was under the command of National Guardsmen and law enforcement officers being brought in under the ultimate command of President Bush. Yeah.
So tell us how that led to the Oath Keepers.
So that's why I started Oath Keepers. I said, okay, we have a problem in our country that, like, when I was in the military service, we were taught.
I think it should be pointed out that he said he's a Yale grad.
Yale Law School.
Yale Law School, and he doesn't. If you don't mind me saying, he looks more like a biker. I apologize for making a comment like that, but you're not looking like Yale Law School.
I take that as a compliment.
Yeah,
given my classmates.
But and that's really, if people knew that your educational background, that people need to know that. So
well, I mean, it's interesting because that was part of my strategy. All as Ron Paulers, I worked for Congressman Paul's office in D.C., and our strategy was, let's go to the best schools we can. Why not? Why not use their scepters of authority against them and help take down the deep state? I'm sure Yale Law School to this day is regretting the fact that I was allowed.
Oh yeah, they'd take that one back if they could.
Yeah, they sure would. So, but the point was is that our political system is corrupt. And the Democrats did the same thing to Sanders, to Bernie Sanders. They stole the nomination. He's a horrible communist. That's not the point. They violated their own rules. It's not about democracy for them. It's about power. And it's true for both parties. And we saw the same thing in resistance against President Trump from the GOP, and it's going on to this day.
Okay, and so you founded Oath Keepers in response to this observation that you were making.
Right.
What is the purpose of Oath Keepers? What does it do?
So both current and former military, police, first responders, and the mission is to remind all the men who took the oath, myself, Justin, for example, whether you're current serving or a veteran, that oath does not expire until you do, and you have a responsibility to defend the Constitution, which is bizarre because now the left, of course, is doing their own version of Oath Keepers.
So you're just an activist organization is what you are?
So it started that way. So, but I said from the very beginning, it's not just about us reaching out. We call it reach, and inspire. Reach out to the current serving, teach them more about the Constitution they swore to defend and about their responsibility under their oath to refuse unlawful orders, but then also to inspire them to do that. Well, how do you, if you're a veteran, how do you inspire a current serving police officer or military service member to risk their career or possibly risk going to prison in the case of military? How do you inspire them to stand up and do the right thing if you're not willing to do the right thing? And so it's from the very beginning, I said us veterans have a responsibility to defend the Constitution also. And we did that at Bundy Ranch. We did that on the rooftops of Ferguson, protecting Americans' right not to be burned to the ground by arsonists. When Black Lives Matter and Antifa raged through the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, we put guys on the rooftops with rifles and protected an entire block of buildings, including apartments.
So if I may repeat it back to you, then as I understand it, Oath Keepers, the entire purpose of it is you saw how the police were used improperly in Katrina. You saw it in other instances. And so the whole purpose of it is to remind police officers and retired veterans of their oath to the Constitution.
Yes, the oath they swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, which is why, like right now, the left telling that to the troops, obviously their intent is try to convince the troops that everything Trump is doing is unconstitutional. But I think President Trump is making a mistake when he says, you're saying that to the troops, that they have a right to refuse or a duty to refuse unlawful orders. That's treason. The intent is treasonous, but the statement itself is actually accurate. So I think he's falling into their trap. Now they get to go around on TV and say, oh, look, he's persecuting us for our free speech. And they'll win in court because they're being clever about it. They're not actually saying, if he orders you, National Guard, to go into Portland, Oregon, that's an unlawful order. They're not doing that. They're just saying you have a responsibility to refuse unlawful orders in general. They're being very clever. So what he should do instead is he should, yes, let's talk about your oath. Let's bring up Tulsi Gabbard and Pete Hegseth, both who served in the military, to give you a dissertation on your oath responsibilities with credibility, and we're going to lay out for you who the domestic enemies, the foreign and domestic enemies of the Constitution are. George Soros, the Communist Party, CCP of China, all their proxies, through the cartels and Trinidad Agua and all these, they're all proxies for the CCP. Venezuela is a proxy for the CCP. And here are the domestic enemies of the Constitution, the communists inside the United States who hate this country. Lay it all out and use that and say, yes, you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution against all of these enemies, foreign and domestic. That's what he should do.
Hey, guys, we're with Stewart Rhodes of Oath Keepers, and his organization is a nonprofit, runs on charitable organization that runs on donations. If you'd like to support Oath Keepers, there's the Give, Send, Go link online. Please go there and help them out if you can.
Yes, givesendgo.com/oath. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I'm just relaunching Oath Keepers. I spent 3 years in prison for nothing, for my free speech. We were there to do security on January 6th. And we had done security all through the Trump administration, protecting Trump supporters against Antifa. Because we saw across the country where police officers would obey the illegal orders of Democrat politicians to stand down and not help Trump supporters. We saw that in Berkeley many times. In Portland, Oregon, they just stand back and let Antifa rage and beat people up with clubs. And so we stepped in and put a stop to that, along with the Proud Boys. Us two groups
How did
together.
You? Oh, okay, physically.
Very often. Oh, yeah, very physically. We would go in there. What's interesting, though, is that because we had 30% of our membership was retired law enforcement who can carry all over the United States under LEOSA. We had a large number of military veterans as well. And Antifa didn't want to close with us. So across the entire, hundreds of operations in the Trump administration, twice in Berkeley, Portland, Oregon, Minneapolis, Minnesota, at Trump rallies, we would protect people coming out of Trump rallies too and give them an escort back to their car. Antifa never attacked anyone we were protecting, never attacked us. We never had to actually punch, kick, pepper spray, or use a baton or shoot anybody. We just deterred them with our presence because they were afraid of us. So very successful. So on J6, we were there to do the exact same thing. We were there to protect two Trump supporter rallies outside on the congressional grounds with permitted events just outside the building. So Ali Alexander's event right outside the East Side doors, and then one block north was the Latinos for Trump event. That's why we were there that day. You'll never hear that in the media, but we were there to do security.
I want to ask you before we get into that, what happened at the Bundy Ranch? Tell me about that experience.
So that was the Bundy family who I'd known because I went to high school and college in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. They stood up and said, we don't consider...
And you knew them from high school?
I knew them from after I got out of the Army. I would teach Constitution classes, and that's when I met Mr. Bundy and his sons. So they were righteous in what they were saying, that, hey, we don't believe these requirements by BLM, Bureau of Land Management. We don't believe this is legitimate. We shouldn't have to comply with them, and we're just not going to. And a lot of Western ranchers were already starting to do this. And so what happened is that we saw the precursors to another Waco. We saw attack dogs being used on women, for example. You saw military like style encirclement and snipers up on the hilltops. We brought in this like 6'7" ex-special forces guy to lead the Bureau of Land Management. It's very militarized, and we saw it as being the same indicators we saw with the Waco standoff. And so our mindset was, we're not going to let that happen again. And so not just Oath Keepers, but other veterans from all over the country came in, and just average citizens, and protected the Bundy family. And our goal was to protect them from being Waco'd, from being slaughtered.
It was an amazing event. First thing is that those park rangers, they were ready to go. They were ready to take out some Americans.
Well, it wasn't just the Bureau of Land Management. It was you had the FBI there. You had this militarized presence of what I consider military contractors there. Like I said, the Special Forces guy was in charge of all of them. So we saw the same indicators that led to what happened at Waco. So by going in there, and what we did in particular, I brought in retired sheriffs, or current serving sheriffs actually, from all over the country. I think it was like 7 current serving sheriffs we brought in to stand with the Bundy family. And really, they were human shields. If they were going to use excessive force against the Bundy family, I wanted them to be, hesitant to do that, because you had sitting state legislators came in from all over the West. New group was formed. A coalition of Western states, COWS, was formed of state legislators from the West coming in to protect the Bundy family. And then we brought sheriffs in. And that was part of our strategy, along with us veterans with rifles in our hands. So I'm glad it didn't go kinetic. I'm glad it ended as it did. But it was important for us, under our oath, to step in and do our best to prevent this family from being murdered.
How close was it to going kinetic?
Well, we had a very credible source in the Department of Defense that told us that they were considering doing a military strike. And then later on, that was actually disclosed in newspapers that the Obama administration was considering using military force at Bundy Ranch. They didn't, but I think the reason why they didn't is because there were so many veterans that came in there, and retired police officers and sheriffs and legislators, that if they had done that, it would have been the spark for another American Revolution, for sure. Because for every veteran that was there who just got out of the military, serving in Iraq or Afghanistan, all their buddies who were still in the military were watching to see what happened.
I want to hear about that.
They would have had a serious problem in the ranks.
Hey, guys, real quick, our featured product is the X39 patch. I'm trying to find the camera there. The X39 patch, you can see it on my arm, and this patch is amazing. What it does, it stimulates your stem cells. Stem cell therapy. This is a patch that RFK Jr. today uses. This patch is made by a company called LifeWave. It is the fastest growing company in the country today because of what it does. And just a couple of quick stories about what it does. There we go. What it does, I cannot figure out these cameras. X39 patch right here. You get 100 of them in this packet. But what the X39 patch does, it's amazing. For myself, I lead a hectic schedule. I work out, I train, I do a lot of athletics, and I work a heck of a week. And I used to have big time energy crashes. I'd fall asleep at the wheel at a red light, and I'd have an energy crash during the day. I started taking this X39 patch. I wake up 5 a.m. sharp as a whip, get out of bed, need no caffeine, go all day until about 11 p.m., crash hard then again. But it's because of the X39 patch. I have endless amounts of energy. Also, after the age of 40, for us men, a lot of times we have that pressure on our bladder. We have to go pee every other minute. It's like a prison sentence. For me, that is gone. It's amazing. It's gone. It's because of this patch. I don't have to do it anymore. It's so good. I have a friend. His wife fell in the shower in 2008, hit her head on the back of the shower, had intensive migraines for more than a decade. She took the X39 patch. Within 3 days, the headaches are gone. I have another friend, a PTSD war veteran. He has to take heavy meds to deal with all the issues that come with war, to sleep at night. He takes the X39 patch. Within 2 weeks, he no longer needs those toxic medicines to sleep. I could go on and on. It's the X39 patch. And with this patch, special price with the Chris Heasley Show, text the word Patriot to 330-606-2304 for a considerable discount, 30% discount. And that's $100 a month, and you get 30 patches. and it's the X39 patch. And so it's incredible technology. It turns the years back in your life. X39 patch. Thank you very
I
much.
gotta try one of those.
But it's incredible, man. I will never go back. I'll never go back. They say that it turns the age of your heart back by 8 years. If you wear it for about 5 years, your heart turns back. I mean, I train, I lift, I wrestle, I do so much. I coach a youth wrestling, and it's because of this patch that I can keep going. All natural remedy.
Hook me up, man.
Yeah, bud. We'll get you taken care of.
All right.
Okay, bud. Getting back to the Bundy Ranch. I mean, okay, so Obama was considering doing a military strike. First thing I want to say.
I'll go find that article and send it to you.
Okay, real quick. First thing I want to say is that the Americans had the high ground there, perched up over that bridge, over the ravine, which put the BLM in a bad situation.
But the best thing about Bundy Ranch, that standoff that happened, is the Bundy family and their cowboy buddies all saddled up. They weren't wearing military kit. There's just a bunch of cowboys.
Looked like a Western movie.
So the optics would have been horrible if they had opened fire. That's the first thing. Second thing, though, that had gotten their asses kicked because, yes, all over the hilltops were guys that could shoot long range, like 338 Lapua, 300 Win Mag, 50 cal rifles. They were just completely outgunned. Now, I grew up in Las Vegas, went to high school in Las Vegas, worked at a gun store in Las Vegas. We used to have, the Las Vegas SWAT team come in and train using our store for urban training. But they look like fish out of water because they're now in an infantry environment out there in the desert. Their eyeballs were like this. They're like fish out of water. They knew they're completely outgunned. So they did the right thing and they de-escalated. Let them have the damn cattle back. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
And so that was a victory for the Bundy family.
Well, the big deal is that it was a land grab. It was a land grab initiative by the American deep state on the Western farmer, which you can go to the Chris Heasley Show Facebook page, and all we talk about is how the Western farmer's being the Western rancher, the Western farmer, they're getting squeezed out of existence as a political tactic against the American people. Yeah. So a great stand was made at the Bundy Ranch for the American farmer.
Right. And there were other ones after that with miners, same issue. They had a mining lease for decades, and suddenly the Bureau of Land Management was coming in and burning down their cabins, trying to drive them out. So a couple times in Montana and in Oregon, we stepped in, same thing.
The people out west who have in states like Oregon that have these expansive land that the federal government has just inched in so far, taken so much of their land, the sheriffs in those counties are essentially like an enemy to the feds because the sheriff is the last line of defense, and out in states like Oregon, the sheriff is like standing up to BLM to stop this encroachment on the American way of life.
Yeah, we saw that in Nevada. One sheriff, I forget which county it was, but he just said, "Hey, you're not going to do that. They're going to come in and confiscate this man's cattle." They're like, "We'll bring our SWAT team." He said, "I'll bring my SWAT team. I'll meet you back here," and they just never came back.
Yeah.
So sheriffs out west have stood up against them. It's not seen in the media as much as it should be, but it's happened many times. And they blink and back off. I've never seen a sheriff stand up and then have the feds jump in and hammer the sheriff. They don't want those optics.
Well, yeah, if Obama had called in a strike, it would have sent shockwaves across the country.
It would have kicked off a civil war.
It would have kicked off a revolution. I mean, yeah, it would have been bloodshed of epic proportions.
Yeah, that's why they didn't do it, and I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, thank God peace prevailed. Let's get to the next conflict. It's sort of like the Revolutionary War. It starts with the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and then it just kept going.
Well, you had your powder alarms first. There was that kind of a Cold War over who controlled the militia supplies, and sometimes the Redcoats would get them, other times the Patriots would get them, and they almost came to blows several times over those. So there have been many, I guess you'd call them potential igniters that have happened through our history. And Bundy Ranch was definitely one of them. But so was Butler, Pennsylvania, when President Trump was shot in the ear. If his head had exploded that day, because the 5.56 round in the head, if he had to happen to turn just at the right moment, his head would have exploded. He'd have been dead. And I believe that would have triggered a civil war in this country, for sure. So that's a problem. Is that?
Yeah, I say all the time, we're living through epic times. I say that these are the most incredible times since the time of Christ, really.
It is. But the message I want to say is that the actual fight is really between a small group of evil elites at the very top and the American people, and even broader than that, people of the planet. And so they use divide and conquer against all of us, try to get us to fight each other. So one thing I want to say is that when I was in prison, after being falsely accused, spent over a year in solitary confinement, a little over 3 years in prison, I got an 18-year sentence. And all I did is to speak out against the election being stolen. I didn't go inside, didn't fight with any police that day. But they railroaded us, the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys were the only groups that they had charged with seditious conspiracy because they didn't like us because we had stood up against them in the streets so long. And so they used us as their poster boys for their fake conspiracy. And the real goal was to get Trump, was to coerce us. That's why they held us all in solitary confinement for over a year each. Some guys 2 years, because they wanted to make us break and then bear false witness against President Trump. That was their goal. So we didn't do that, went to trial and stood the heat and did not give in. But then we were punished with long sentences. Enrique Tarrio got 22 years, I got 18 years.
Is he out?
Oh, yeah, he was out. He's pardoned. So on January the 20th, 2025, when President Trump was inaugurated, he kept his promise to set us free. So he pardoned everyone, that was still all of us, except for us 14. 10 Oath Keepers and 4 Proud Boys were not pardoned. We were given commutations only, which means your sentence is reduced to time served. So you're set free.
But you're still guilty.
But I'm still a convicted seditionist, which is complete nonsense. So I'm still a convicted felon, and I've lost my right to bear arms. I've lost all my veterans benefits. I was service-connected disabled veteran with a fused spine from a parachuting accident. That's all gone. I'm in the same boat as other men that are also veterans. Joe Biggs, for example, 82nd Airborne veteran, also service-connected disabled vet. Same with him. Zach Reel, Marine Corps. There's like 8 of us that are still waiting for a pardon.
I want to put that up again. The Give Send Go link. When it runs again here, Fuma will get it up. But again, Stewart had all of his veteran's pension taken from him. He's a disabled veteran only because he attended a political rally, exercised his First Amendment right. So if you have an ability to give to Stewart's cause, it's givesendgo.com/oath. Okay, so what steps are being taken right now to get you fully pardoned?
Well, I've got a pardon application in with Ed Martin. He's a pardon attorney, and we're waiting and hoping that'll happen. But my fear and concern is that it's being blocked by others, potentially by Todd Blanche, who's the Assistant Attorney General. So we don't really know exactly what's going on with that. But like I said, they were fortunate of us that there's still 12 of us that need a pardon. 8 of us are veterans. I don't know why that happened. I don't blame President Trump for that. I believe that there's someone in his circle that convinced him that, those guys, they need to be, not pardoned for some reason. I think the reason why they want that is there's someone that wants that false narrative to live on. That they must have been up to something. That's why they weren't pardoned.
They need to keep the seed of doubt in people's minds to some extent.
Exactly right. That's what I believe is true. But I have faith ultimately that we'll be pardoned.
Yeah, man, we're still. It took them 13 years to take down. It took Jefferson 13 years to take down the Barbary Pirates. I mean, what we're attempting to take down is these elite families at the top that have been around for hundreds of years that took down the Romanovs in Russia. And so we have our work cut out for us. It's all going to happen with time, I believe. Justice will happen.
Well, I believe we had a brief reprieve when President Trump was saved in Butler. That's why I have a tattoo on my arm of that day. Remember his fist raised in the air saying fight. All the men in my unit, black, white, and Hispanic, all cheered for President Trump because they said, hey, Trump's a legit OG. They respect him as a man because he showed courage that day. So I think he's been saved by God, and we've been given a grace period by the Lord to save our country. But it's our responsibility to actively fight for it now. I believe we have only this term to fix it.
Yeah, I live in the most diverse county in the country, Fort Bend County, Texas. And the one thing that all people of all different types, colors, creeds, nations, that they all have in common is the love of family. And they see the left as a threat to their family unit. And this solidarity that's happening in Fort Bend County is it's achieving record levels that it's never achieved before. Let's step back. From the beginning, tell me why you went to the January 6th Trump rally. What was the purpose of that day? Why you went, what you hope to achieve?
Well, first, to protest against a stolen, illegal, and unconstitutional election. I spoke that morning at the Latinos event, Trump event. I'd spoken in November and December, but also to do security. We're there to do security for those events and protect Trump supporters in general. Because anytime Antifa's raging in the streets, they'll attack the elderly, disabled veterans, families with kids, and the vulnerable. So we would offer free escorts back to their hotel or to a metro stop. So we were there to do security that day, but also to join with our fellow conservatives in protesting against the coup. It was a righteous protest. Best way to look at J6 is a righteous protest against the coup that was then manipulated to create the false narrative that there was an insurrection. But they made sure, as we know now, there are 274 FBI agents in the crowd undercover. I'm not surprised by that at all. I believe it's only the tip of the iceberg. What about DHS? What about CIA? What about their military contractor cutouts that they use? What about undercover DC Metro? So there are a bunch of undercover officers in the crowd of all those different agencies that were making sure doors got open, making sure windows got broken. And then you had Antifa also dressed like Trump supporters too. So I think they're probably working together. So that's what happened that day. They knew the pattern of in November and December, big rallies down by the White House or down by Freedom Plaza that marched to the Capitol for additional rallies. They saw that in November and December. They saw it was planned for J6, same exact thing. They said, how can we use that? So they made sure everyone got steered into the Capitol. And then they said, oh my God, it's an insurrection. Old ladies walking around. And that's why Tucker Carlson was fired by Fox News when he started showing people just walking around inside taking selfies. And they realized this is a big setup. And it's not what they were told it is. The truth is, the vast majority who went inside the Capitol did nothing but walk around and take selfies.
Marjorie Taylor Greene did maybe a 50-minute expose of the reality of that day, which completely exposed the farce that the American deep state and the corporate media was putting on the American people.
Right.
You know, it's so evil, the fact that these institutions that pretend to represent us see us as the enemy. And we didn't pick this fight. We didn't want this fight. But they certainly have it out for the American citizen, and it came through on that day.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went there. Okay, all these things happened. Tell me, what did you see any violence yourself? Or
no, because I was on the east side. I was on the northeast corner, just trying to locate my security teams because they were escorting event VIPs for Al Alexander's event. We're going to hold an event right outside the east side doors. Roger Stone was going to be the keynote speaker. Marjorie Taylor Greene, Louis Gohmert was going to speak there. Members of Congress were going to speak after the challenges to the slate of electors. That was the plan that day. I believe that's where President Trump was going to go when he said, I'm going to go with you. I believe he wanted to go and be at that rally. So we're going to be the security for that rally. So I was trying to find my security teams because I knew there was some fighting going on the west side because one of our operational leaders called me and said, hey, there's fist fighting going on between some of the Trump supporters and some of the police on the west side. I want to keep my guys out of that. But I want to say this.
And I don't believe it was Trump supporters either.
Well, but here's what I want to say. I went to prison with some of the guys who did end up getting in scuffles with the cops. But why were they fighting against the cops? Why? Because they were using excessive force. There were police officers that were hitting people in the head, like Roseanne Boyle, an unconscious woman laying on the ground, being struck in the head by a police officer with a wooden club. That's lethal force. So
I read that they were beating that woman's lifeless body well after she was already over.
Well, it might have killed her. We don't know her cause of death. And that not only that, they were firing, like point blank, firing CS canisters into people's faces. One guy had his whole cheek blown out. That's also lethal force. Or using rubber bullets, not just on their legs, which is what they're supposed to do, but below the waist, on their heads, on
at
their faces.
Near point
Once
blank
again,
range.
That's lethal force. So they had police officers unlawfully using excessive force and lethal force. That's what caused the men. Any man with assault is going to fight back and try to stop that from happening.
Well, the other thing I read is that the police were causing stampedes to happen where people were getting stampeded, getting caught underneath the people. And then when the Americans attempted to save that person, the police were intervening, and that's where the fistfights. They were attempting to save lives.
And then they got charged with assaulting a police officer. In fact, I knew guys who got charged with assaulting a police officer because they felt something hit their head. They put their hand up like that. This big sign was being passed through the crowd from behind them. Because they touched it, they were charged with assaulting a police officer because it was later used to push against police.
I mean, these travesties justice needs to happen at some point.
It does. All the video should be exposed to the American people. Every single piece of footage should be published for the American people to go see ourselves.
What is the status of that?
Congress still has it. They have not disclosed to the American people. You've got men like Steve Baker from Blaze Media have looked at it. That's why when Kash Patel, that's why I don't like Kash Patel. So when it was revealed, not by Kash Patel's office in the FBI, a member of Congress, his office disclosed to the American people there were 274 undercover agents that day, which means that, of course, they had lied to us all this time. So, but in response to that, Kash Patel's response was, they were improperly used that day for riot control. And Steve Baker's like, I've watched all the video. I've never seen any evidence of any FBI agent being used for riot control that day.
He's carrying the water for somebody.
He's covering for them. So I believe he has become the deep state's bitch, to be blunt. So I believe he's been compromised, and that's why President Trump should fire him. I believe he should be fired. I believe Bartlett should be fired from, no, it's not Bartlett. What's the name of the guy in charge of the CIA? Radcliffe. I think Radcliffe should be fired. I believe Pam Bondi should be fired. He needs new leadership because none of these agencies have purged out the old guard, establishment, and communists inside their organizations. They're still in there.
Yeah, they dribble the basketball down the court and they refuse to dunk the ball, take the winning shot.
Yeah.
They always fumble the ball at the last minute.
And if we don't purge them out now, when the Democrats come into power, God forbid, it'll be exponentially worse because all those agents go right back to the job of persecuting us.
Okay, so the day ends, and then did the day end? You go home copacetically, free from harm, sleep good at night that night, or when did the next violation of your rights happen?
Well, I didn't go inside or fight with any police, so it took them a year to cook up. They went and coerced guys into taking plea deals where they agreed to plead guilty. We were all threatened with life in prison. Some guys were afraid of that, and they agreed to plead guilty to seditious conspiracy, a couple oath keepers. And then they also signed a false statement of facts that, Stewart Rhodes planned since November.
Well, what was it?
To attack.
Okay, so what's his name? Red Revolver Radio? That guy?
Yeah. Well,
that's the guy who said that stuff.
Well, no, he put out a hit piece on me in the summer of 2021. I should have sued him for defamation.
Yeah.
It was a horrible hit piece. Like, Stewart Rhodes is a Fed, and even if he's arrested, he's still a Fed. This is complete garbage.
Yeah.
So if you don't, you know how they treat you if you're actually a Fed? Same way that Ray Epps got treated. Got treated with no indictment for a long time. Then he finally got a misdemeanor. Well,
to disprove the theory, you got locked up behind bars.
Well, and also, I didn't take a deal.
Yeah.
I went to trial, looked the jury right in the eye. And
okay, so real quick here. So the event's over. It took them a year to arrest you.
Right. They had to cook up false confessions and false evidence.
Okay,
right.
And what was the charges against you?
Seditious conspiracy. Myself and my co-defendants.
And they're essentially saying that you took up arms against the country.
They said that we were the seditious conspiracy statute this is a terrible statute passed during the Civil War that was designed to get around the treason clause, which requires two witnesses of the same overt act, and also requires confession in open court. And it defines treason as making war against the United States or aiding against enemies. So instead of that, the Lincoln administration passed a law that just said if you find that two or more persons agreed, conspired together, to resist with force the authority of the United States, you may find them guilty of seditious conspiracy. No act element. No requirement that you do anything to further the supposed conspiracy. So really, and the thing is, it has no protection for free speech. So, for example, let's say you and Justin are having beers, and you're like, hey, if they were trying to take my guns, I'm going to give them bullets first if the government tries to confiscate my guns. Right there, you just agreed, and he says, yeah, I agree. You just agreed to resist with force some future date the authority of the United States. That's what they used against us. They used all of our rhetoric, all of our free speech about the election, about Obama being an imposter. I called him a CCP puppet from the very beginning. I stand by that. All of that was used against us at trial. All my open letters to President Trump, encouraging him to invoke the Insurrection Act, use his power of declassification to expose the bad guys, which I believe he still should do to this day. That's the best thing he can do to take them down is exposure. But all of that was used against us in front of the jury. They never had any evidence of an actual plan to go inside the Capitol or do anything. They just used our free speech against us.
Did you use a court-appointed attorney, or did you actually have to hire an attorney?
No, so Cindy Powell stepped up and paid for my attorney,
which
was really good. So she was a good person.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter. You're gonna no matter how good your attorney is, in Washington, D.C., in front of all those leftist jurors. All these jurors admitted they had been at Black Lives Matter protest. They had been at the Pink Hat protest against President Trump, anti-gun protest, and brought my guns from Texas, 2 ARs that I had that are lawful to own in Texas, and brought them and showed them to the jury and said, look at these horrible, evil guns that he had. In his
they can't do that so much anymore.
No, but sure they can. Why can't they?
Well, I'm saying that in the public sphere, the public opinion has changed against guns. Where when we were raised that the gun can come alive and get you in your sleep, and a lot of that nonsense is gone.
DC is still that way.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
this
DC.
This is DC, brother.
Yeah.
So it's like being tried in the Soviet Union. He's like a radical leftist, an anti-gun leftist.
No, I'm not questioning that. Yeah.
And then of course we all filed for a change of venue to move the trial outside of DC. Look at a fair trial. Like, hey, we just move it to rural Virginia. Right,
don't let that happen.
No, not at all. So none of us got a fair trial. None of us had a fair jury. That's why I said from the very beginning, it's completely proper for President Trump to pardon everyone because of the presumption of innocence in this country. They're presumed innocent until proven guilty in front of an impartial jury and in front of an impartial judge. None of us had that. All the judges were violently anti-Trump and against us, and the jurors were too. And they denied venue change because they didn't want President Trump to have any precedent of venue change to point to, and they put him on trial.
Yeah.
Because their ultimate goal was to put him on trial also. They tried to.
So how long was the trial? How long did it take until they issued your conviction?
Month and a half trial. And the jury was out, I think, a couple of days, came back with a conviction. I was found not guilty for conspiracy to obstruct official proceeding. I was found not guilty of conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging his duty.
You get 20, 30 years.
No, I got 18 years.
18 years.
18 years, yeah.
I'm sorry, I never did. Okay.
No problem. I mean, the point of that is that I think the jurors realized I didn't actually tell my guys to go inside or anything. But they still got me for my free speech. It was my open letters to President Trump that were being painted as the conspiracy. That me and President Trump were in this conspiracy together.
Supporting President Trump is a thought crime, according to the left.
Oh, yeah.
So you better obey those leftist dictates or...
So we had multiple witnesses commit. We had two witnesses, two police officers get caught committing perjury on the stand. To this day, they have not been charged. That's why I want Pam Bondi fired. Just on that alone, they have not been charged with perjury.
Okay. So get into it. So you're convicted. You go to jail. Do you go to a minimum security jail, maximum security jail? What kind of a jail did you go to?
So I had my only priors were speeding tickets. I had no prior arrests at all. So I had camp points. I should have been at a camp with no fence. But the judge put a management variable in there because I had a terrorism enhancement he added on, and they put something to a medium security prison. It's just complete garbage. So this is the problem: is that whatever the rules are, they'll just do what they want. That's the lesson for you guys: is that it really was like the Gulag Archipelago
in D.C. In D.C.
Well, I was there in D.C. for a while.
No, I'm just saying, that line, whatever they want to do, they're more tethered down outside of D.C.
Anywhere, I'll tell you what, Austin, I would say Houston's probably also that way.
Yeah, but in Texas, our state reps are passing laws that if the DAs don't stay in accordance with the law, they can be pulled.
That's great.
I think that there's something proposed for the courts, the judges. There is, I'm almost certain, for the judges as well.
Right. Well, I forgot the name of I think his name was Perry, right? The Army combat veteran, current serving military guy in Austin who's driving an Uber, who wound up shooting an AK welding leftist. Remember that?
No.
He was driving Uber. It was a Black Lives Matter protest, and this white
yes, I remember it.
with
Yes,
an AK-47 pointed his rifle at him, and of course he did the right thing, pulled his pistol out and shot him. Right. That's self-defense. But he was found guilty of murder, but thankfully Abbott was able to pardon him.
Yeah.
So when you have a Republican governor, you're good. Well, look at Tina Peters up there in Colorado. She was railroaded for calling out their fraud and doing her job as an election official to report that they are stealing the election in Colorado. And she's in prison now for 8 years. President Trump should go rescue her. I agree with Ivan Raiklin completely on this. We're of the same mind on this. He should order the Secret Service and the U.S. Marshals to go in there and grab her out of that prison and bring her to the White House as a material witness.
Yeah, in the state of Texas, they've passed laws to rein in activist judges and to rein in district attorneys. But the prosecution of those laws, I would say, have not really been tested. They've not really seen those laws enforced.
That's good. So, you have a Republican governor, that's great.
Yeah.
But wherever you don't have that shield, that's why I brought up Tina Peters in Colorado. Wherever you have a Democrat governor and atrocious, horrible, Soros-appointed DAs, you're in trouble. That's the problem in this country. Wherever the Democrats are in power, you are living in the Soviet Union now.
Yeah, man.
That's just reality. If you're conservative.
Obey the leftist dictate. Okay, so getting back to it. All right, so you go to a medium security prison. Tell me about your experience in prison.
I was treated from day one. Well, first, I was in solitary confinement for over a year first, the day of my arrest. This is another important point. Even though my only priors were speeding tickets, from the day of my arrest, I was held in solitary confinement. It would not give me pretrial release.
Can you tell me about what that situation looked like?
Imagine being locked in your bathroom.
How big was the room?
Like 6 by 9.
No, any windows?
Yes, I had windows. But you have a toilet and a sink, and then a concrete slab for your bed, and then a thin mattress pad and a blanket. That's it. So that's where you live 22 hours a day. This is the Alexandria jail.
How do you keep your sanity?
Three things. One, my faith.
Did you read the Bible?
Absolutely.
You were
every
given
day.
a Bible.
Yes. I made sure I began my day with a prayer of thanks. I wanted to make sure that I kept a grateful heart. So I thank the Lord for my kids. I thank the Lord for my health, my strength, and then I asked Him for to watch over my children and then to keep me strong.
Bless you, man.
So, and also because I'm a veteran and a history buff, I knew that what I was going through is nothing compared to what my uncles and grandfathers went through in World War II. Nothing compared to what our POWs had gone through, whether they're being held by the Vietnamese, North Koreans, or the Japanese in World War II. So I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. And I saw myself as a POW, being held by the domestic enemies of the Constitution. And I'm not going to let them break me. And so that's why, I made sure that I kept my perspective. This is I can deal with this. I'll be okay. This is not as bad as what our men have gone through in other conflicts. So that helped me get through.
Okay, so, all right.
And I'm not claustrophobic. I can imagine it'd be different if someone was claustrophobic. You're being locked in a small room like that. Yeah, it'd be bad for a guy like that.
Okay, I'm just thinking
That was
like,
done to a lot of us, not just to me. A bunch of us were held like that to coerce us into bearing false witness against President Trump. That was the ultimate goal.
I want to jump back. I'm sorry. I can't, but like, clearly, I mean, you sacrifice so much. And Red Revolver Radio, whatever that, they put that hit piece out on you saying that you're a deep...
Never apologized.
Why would he do that?
I don't know. This is the problem, is that journalists...
Is he an operative is what I'm wondering.
Journalists on the left do that all the time. They just write hit pieces on you. But I think journalists on the right are susceptible to it. This is Darren Beattie of
right.
News. So I think he just wanted to have a big story. He wanted to go find... We want to go find the boogeyman. We want to go find the feds. And there were feds involved in J6. One of them was in my own organization. We found out only at trial. We're going to call this guy as a witness. Then the prosecution told us, well, actually, he works for us. He's been working for us since August of 2020.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's what happened. And we were totally blindsided by this. So there were feds. But people, in the interest of trying to find the Fed, they want to get the scoop, they want to have the first story and be the guy. And so they tend to like just jump.
Yeah.
And so if they're fed stuff by people who don't like me, holding old grudges, like back from Bundy Ranch. One guy's name was Pete Santilli, for example. Just what he does. He doesn't like you, he accuses you of being a Fed. And so he feeds, or other guys like that, feed Revolver News a bunch of crap. Oh, Stewart Rhodes is a Fed.
And who's Pete Santilli with?
I don't know. He does his own thing.
I've heard the name.
I consider him an ankle biter. He's just a piece of junk ankle biter.
Yeah.
But the point is, like back at Bundy Ranch when I first saw him, he'd been calling me, well, Oath Keepers must be a Fed front because that's how it got so big so fast. We had 40,000 members nationwide. So I see him at Bundy Ranch face to face. He's like, oh, I apologize for that. Now I realize you're really a patriot. I'm sorry. I said, okay, I accept
Why don't you go public with that?
I accept your apology. But then later, oh, Stewart Rhodes is the Fed. Same kind of crap. So Darren Beattie ran with it. I'm just guessing because he just wanted to have the scoop. But what he should do is be a man and apologize because he got it wrong. That's all.
Did Steve Bannon ever have you on?
Only after J6 when I saw him at CPAC. Yeah.
But not after the accusations were made against you?
No, I was in prison by then.
Yeah. Okay, so you go to prison. 1 year in solitary confinement, man, I feel for you.
About 14 months. And other guys did 2 years. Just to make it clear. That wasn't the worst one. The worst ones were the ones they arrested right away. They arrested people within days of J6. That's what's so frustrating for us right now. Where are the arrests? Where's the accountability?
And how were those guys treated worse than you? In what way?
Longer, just in solitary for 2 years, some of them.
It's heartbreaking,
So
man.
I got to give props to my co-defendants. Kelly Meggs, Kenny Harrelson, Jessica Watkins, Thomas Caldwell. Those are my 4 co-defendants in my trial.
If you're hearing this story again, I want you to think about giving to Oath Keepers. GiveSendGo/Oath. We put it up there regularly. Listen to Stewart's story. He sacrificed a lot on January 6th. He's a veteran, and he's paying a huge sacrifice. This story is incredible. Please keep going.
So I want to give props to them. They could have gone home. All they had to do was sign a confession that says, yes, Stewart Rhodes told us to go inside. We were all in a conspiracy together. They could have gone home. To their credit and their honor, they refused to do that. And I could have gone home if I turned down President Trump.
And they have families at home that are...
Yeah.
just
So these are all good patriots. And thing is all of them are in the same boat I'm in. We all need a pardon. We were all denied a pardon. We were all given only. I believe this is how it goes. If you take a deal, so the two guys that took the deal and pled guilty to this is conspiracy get no prison time, and then when President Trump came in, they got pardoned. But those of us who went to trial and refused to take a deal were punished by not getting a pardon, and we were sentenced to prison. So I think the regime likes to punish those who tell the truth. And reward those who tell
obey
the lie.
the leftist dictate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get a year in solitary. First of all, how was the treatment by the guards?
Good. I mean, other than you're in solitary confinement, but they treated us most of us with respect. Most of the guards. Some of the guys that went into D.C. jail early on were treated badly by some of the guards who were like African immigrants because they had been told that these were racist. They were white nationalists, and so some of those guards treated them badly at first. But later they realized they came to know him and realized that was nonsense, and the treatment got better.
But I heard that there was physical abuse. I heard one man had his head bashed. He lost an eyeball. Things of that
so there was
sort.
some of that. That's what I'm saying is that I think that's probably why that happened. Where I was at in Alexandria, and also before that in Cimarron, Oklahoma, most of the guards were conservatives and knew it was a bunch of crap. They said, "Hey, man, we know you're a political prisoner."
So even you're saying even in the worst of situations when the tensions were flared, eventually the relationship between guard and the prisoners actually settled down. And
I wasn't there
normal.
for that first part. I wasn't arrested until January 13, 2022. It took them a year to cook up fake evidence.
I want to tell you, I did a speech in Fort Bend County, and during it, I did a shout out to the January 6th prisoners, and I nearly got a standing ovation. It was right in the thick of it when you probably were in jail. Okay.
Now, there were some guys held in places where most of the guards were Democrats. And that was a different story. That's just reality.
Yeah, and do you have any stories from that? How they were treated?
Only third hand. They were treated badly because they were leftists that were in the guard positions. But that's rare. Most of the guards in this country are conservatives.
So how long were you? Okay, so you get out of solitary confinement. How much longer were you in jail?
Total of 3 years.
So 2 more years in jail, 24 months.
Right. So at sentencing, I want to make this clear. At sentencing, some people were convinced by their scummy lawyers to blame President Trump. I refused to do that. Looked the judge right in the eye and said, "I'm a political prisoner. Like President Trump, my only crime is opposing those who are destroying our country."
I hope all the Trump supporters out there hear what pressure he was put under to throw President Trump under the bus.
Yeah, I refused to do that.
And he refused to do so.
And that pissed the judge off, big time.
Yeah.
And I also said, my oath will not let me close my eyes to the plain text of Article 2 of the Constitution. That was an illegal and unconstitutional election. That's why we were there to protest against it.
So
Same thing I told the jury,
And how were the conditions once you went into a more normal jail situation, not out of
Not
solitary?
bad. I was at Cumberland, Maryland. It's one of the better mediums in the country. So not bad. Pretty good conditions.
Were you able to see your family during those 36 or so months?
I could receive visitors. I kept myself busy. I was a GED tutor. I was an adult reading instructor and also a suicide watch companion, which is why I know that Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. Because you're on suicide watch, someone watching you. I was on a 4-hour shift just watching that guy through plexiglass. That's all you do is watch the guy. So,
Yeah.
but I mean, here's the thing. Not only do the prisoners, or the guards treat me with respect, but also the prisoners too. A lot of them they hate the federal government because the federal government put them in prison. Federal prosecutors, in their case, railroaded them into prison also. A lot of the men are actually innocent. I met many of them like that in prison. Or like you get a guy who was a low-level drug user, for example, one young man. He was accused of being a conspiracy because the drug dealer gave some other girl some drugs and she died of a fentanyl overdose. They went and got that guy's phone and said, everybody in the phone is in a conspiracy together to kill her. That's what he was charged with. And took a plea deal to take 5 years instead of going to prison for 30 years. So he was railroaded into prison. That's an example of what they do across the country. This is important for the audience to understand, is our legal system in this country is broken. Prosecutors across the country lie all the time, coerce witnesses, suborn perjury, put people up on the stand that will lie, and the judges do nothing about it. They lie to the grand juries, and then they have someone else lie to the jurors, and then they coerce you into a confession. But then when you sign a confession, it says, I am not taking. I'm not saying this because I'm being coerced. I'm saying this because it's in fact true, and it's totally a bunch of crap. And everyone knows it. The judges know it. The prosecutors know it. The defense attorneys know it. Everyone knows it's a lie, but they're being coerced into this. That's just reality.
We need an ethical revolution in our country. A lack of ethics has become the norm, and it goes back to, I think, our religious foundations of the country. They need to be returned. Okay, so you're released from prison. Tell me about your life. What year did you get out?
So I got out on inauguration night, January 20th, 2025. And
Wow, you're fresh out of jail. Wow.
So that night, we watched the inauguration on TV, but our facility was shut down because someone got stabbed. So we're all in our cells, but I could still listen to TV on my radio. I'm listening to President Trump sign all the executive orders for the pardons, and I knew it was getting out. So they came up my door about 11:30 at night, knocked on it, and said, pack your crap, you're out of here. It was fantastic. But when they out processed me, I saw my paperwork. It said, "Oh, you have to report to your probation officer." I was like, wait a minute, what's this? Didn't I get a pardon? That's when I found out that I had not been pardoned, I'd been commuted. But I'm still glad to be, out of prison. And two of the J6 advocates that I had known for my entire time in prison came and picked me up. Jim Baker from Condemned USA and Mel Hawley, who's now my co-author for the book we're writing about J6. They came and picked me up. It was fantastic. I don't want to minimize that. We're very grateful to be out of prison. All of us are grateful to President Trump. But we want full accountability. We want all of us who still need a pardon to get one. And more than anything else, I want the deep state defeated. I want every FBI agent who persecuted all of us and intimidated witnesses and our families to be fired. These are the same ones that went after abortion protesters, same ones that infiltrated the Catholic Church, completely illegitimate oath breakers. They should be fired. And I also want every friggin', for the last 20 years at least, anyone who's been a paid informant by the FBI or any other part of the government to go after the political right, I want them exposed. Their names should be published to the American people. Their faces should be on billboards outside in the towns where they live so that their neighbors know who they are. Because otherwise, when they come back into power, they will do the same thing to other Americans. We have to expose them and take away that power.
Yeah, we need to raise the expectations of the American people to expect full accountability and the full enforcement of the law down to the smallest nook and cranny.
We have to pressure President Trump to get it done. We have 3 years now to get this done.
Well, at the local level, everything you're saying, I mean, I could take this conversation on another hour and just talk about all these same methods, tactics. Everything is done at the local level, and often in coordination with the American deep state. They're getting faxes, and I believe that there are secret emails that they have that are, are going back and forth.
Yeah, Soros money or communist Chinese money has infiltrated our politics all over the country, down to the state and local level. Absolutely.
Okay, so Stewart, our hour went by very fast.
Yeah,
and I apologize for that. But I want to give you the floor here. What do you want to leave? What do you want to say to leave the audience on the way out?
So I believe this is what we have to do. Like the founders said, duty is ours, results are God's. It's our responsibility to pressure President Trump and encourage him to do his duty, take the deep state down. The single best thing he can do is through declassification. He can declassify anything held in the files of the FBI, CIA, etc. No one could stop him from doing that. He should declassify anything that's not a legitimate national security secret. Everything else should be exposed. All the dirt, that's how the intelligence agencies control the politicians and judges and executives and governors, you name it. This is what Jeffrey Epstein was doing, working for the Mossad and the CIA together as a blackmail operation to snare political elites all over the world and control them. That's what all the Five Eyes do all over the world. Accept that reality. President Trump can deactivate it and take it down through exposure. Declassification and then dropping the hammer with invoking the Insurrection Act to go arrest them. Once you expose them, arrest them. And start with the judges. That's why they're being blocked to him right now. How do you take them down? You've got to expose them first. You're never going to get accountability otherwise. You're not going to fix this through conventional politics. He has got to, it's constitutional, it's within his power to do it, declassify and then invoke the Insurrection Act. I've been calling for that since 2020. And General Flynn's been calling for that too because it's the only answer. Other than that, what's our duty? Our duty as the American people is, of course, encourage him to do his duty, but our responsibility is to get ready for what we know is coming. I believe there's going to be October 7th style attacks in this country. They're going to use that, and it will ultimately be a false choice. Just like 9/11, got a bunch of conservatives to cheer for the destruction of the Constitution, the Patriot Act, creation of DHS, mass surveillance state. That's why I call Snowden a hero, because he was exposing what was being done to the American people illegally by the NSA. That was all created with people cheering for it because they wanted to get terrorists. Same thing will be done to us. If we're not prepared for October 7th style attacks in our communities, we should be able to handle our own security locally as the founders intended. That's why they wanted us to be the militia. We have to take care of ourselves and our own local communities so that we don't have that false choice. The false choice is going to be, oh, if you don't want that, then you have Palantir coming in with, again, all these massive data centers being built all over the country, electronic ID, electronic programmable money, Chinese social credit score, control over the American people. We'll be told that's what you have to do to find the terrorists and stop them. And a lot of conservatives, when that happens, will jump right into that, just like they did post 9/11. So just be aware of that bait and switch. Get off your butt, men, in your communities, in your churches, and get strong. Neighborhood, church, town, and county. That's why I'm starting what I'm calling the Strong County Project, focused on just that. Get ready for hard times coming. Get ready to be able to weather them together in your local community where the founders intended you to be strong. That's what I'd say.
And I second everything that Stewart said. That was an incredible way to end the show. Activism happens at the local level first. In order to make change, you have to be active at the local level. That was incredible, Stewart.
You bet, brother.
Yeah, man. So again, I just want to say one last time, I appreciate everything you've done, Stewart. I appreciate your service to the country. I appreciate your service as a citizen and what you went through and endured.
Thank you.
It's unthinkable, and you are a hero. So we appreciate you.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say is, if you want to join Oath Keepers, if you're either current serving or former military, police, firefighter, first responder, you can be a full member. But if you're not any of those, we still want you to join as an associate member because we're all in this together. And the responsibility of veterans like myself, I serve as a paratrooper and a firefighter, our responsibility is to train you, all the other men. So don't see it as, oh, it's only for the veterans. It's for everyone. You can go to oathkeepers.info for more information on the organization. If you want to join, I don't have credit cards available on the website yet, but you can go to the givesendgo.com/oath. You donate $100, just put in the note, this is for membership, and I'll honor that. You can become a member by that. So we welcome you to participate, but if you can't, then please at least donate to support our mission.
Great.
All right,
Yep.
brother. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Show. On Wednesday of next week, we will have Mays Middleton, who is a leading candidate for the Texas Attorney General position. So please tune in for that. And other than that, you have a great week. Thanks for tuning in.
God bless.
This is The Chris Heasley Show, coming to you from Radio Debang.